When most people think about Abraham Lincoln as a film character, they probably picture something along the lines of Raymond Massey's performance in the movie Abe Lincoln in Illinois, regardless of whether or not they've actually seen it. This is because Massey's performance as Lincoln was all but ubiquitous while he was alive, and was often considered to be the definitive portrayal of Abraham Lincoln. It's also probably the source of some of the more common myths of what Lincoln was like, particularly in regards to his voice. This is because Massey's presence as Lincoln was so omnipresent, that many of the other portrayals of Lincoln around the same time, educational films, documentaries, historical things, even other movies, many of these were actually more based upon Massey's performance as Lincoln than what Lincoln was like historically. But let's back up a little bit here. Abe Lincoln in Illinois was directed by John Cromwell and released in the year 1940, 1 year after John Ford released the movie Young Mr. Lincoln, which we reviewed earlier. Now, while it might be interesting to refer to Abe Lincoln in Illinois as a historically accurate response to a myth-making film like Young Mr. Lincoln, I think the movies being released around the same time is more a case of happy coincidence. You see, Abe Lincoln in Illinois was based upon a play by Robert E. Sherwood that opened on Broadway in the year 1938, and then won the Pulitzer Prize for Drama in the year 1939. So I would think it'd be pretty natural with the publicity that came from that the company would want to make a film adaptation soon afterwards. Massey originated the role of Abraham Lincoln on Broadway to great acclaim, so it was pretty natural that he played the part on film. He was also already in his mid-40s by the time the film was made, so it's a little silly to see him play Lincoln in his early scenes when he's supposed to be in his 20s, when there was no attempt at de-aging him. Although, considering what Walter Houston looked like in the early scenes of Abraham Lincoln, this could probably be seen as a good thing too. Now, it's fairly well known, at least now, that Abraham Lincoln did not speak in the impressive baritone voice that he's commonly portrayed as having, and I think Raymond Massey's performance is probably one of the main reasons people think that. But there's something else about his performance that's just a little bit weird. In an attempt, I think, to mask the fact that his voice isn't nearly high enough to be a proper Lincoln voice, the Canadian Massey adopts a weird sort of accent that I think is supposed to approximate Kentucky, but ends up sounding more like Forrest Gump by way of Fargo. It's a little bit distracting and a little bit mannered, but like his age, you get used to it as the movie goes on. The movie starts out with a young Lincoln leaving home to work on a boat hauling a load of pigs by river to New Orleans. After the boat crashes near the city of New Salem and the pigs escape, Lincoln has to try to get them all back. It was probably one of the oddest meet-cutes in biopic history. Lincoln tackles a pig right in front of the beautiful Anne Rutledge, who's played by Mary Howard. He is smitten immediately, and the two of them have an appropriately awkward conversation before he's called back to the boat.
My name's Abe Lincoln.
And mine's Anne Rutledge.
I don't know the name of the pig.
Well, where are you going with all those pigs?
New Orleans, if we don't hit any more mill dams on the way. You live here, Miss Rutledge?
Yes. I suppose it doesn't look like much to a traveled man like you.
Looks like a fine place to me. Fine people. If you think I like to travel, you're wrong. I'm only doing it because I got to, same as the pigs. Hey! Hey!
The relationship between Anne and Abe is delved into much deeper in this film than in either Abraham Lincoln or Young Mr. Lincoln. For one thing, Anne is shown to have a fiancé in the movie prior to falling in love with Lincoln, and the fact that the fiancé has to live on the East Coast for business causes her to have a considerable amount of angst. She has to wait for him for years, and after waiting for so long, and having an intimate conversation where she admits that he's probably been unfaithful to her, Abe abruptly, almost accidentally, admits his own love for her, and then she falls in love with him. The story about Lincoln courting Anne is played parallel to the story of people who he knows who are trying to convince him to run for office. Now, I criticize the D.W. Griffith film for being in awe of Lincoln and treating him as a great man all the way from the start. Abe Lincoln in Illinois does something similar to this to an extent, but it is much smarter in its execution. Lincoln here isn't seen as a secular saint who overshadows others with his greatness, but instead, especially in the early scenes, as a procrastinator of sorts who is scared and lacking self-confidence. Everybody around him seems to see that he has the potential to be a great man and a great politician, but he does not see that in himself. He seems to be actively trying to resist becoming the great man he has so much potential to be, rather than trying to embrace it from the start. It's a unique dynamic, and I sort of like it. It humanizes him a little bit more. In fact, it's actually not until after that Anne falls in love with him that he finally gets the motivation to run for the state house. And after Anne dies, all the motivation to hold that office seems to get sucked right out of him. And you see, in the scene right afterwards, that he decided not to seek re-election.
A large mass meeting in Boston, Massachusetts. Many orators paid tribute to the heroic memory of the late Elijah Lovejoy. Thousands of New Englanders shouted, "He shall be avenged." I wonder what the great Stephen A. Douglas has to say to that.
The great Stephen A. Douglas has this much to say. Freedom of the press is all very well until liberty becomes license. Lovejoy's life would have been spared if he'd listened to the dictates of reason instead of his own rip-roaring fanaticism. But perhaps my good friend Abe Lincoln doesn't agree.
I agree that Lovejoy should have listened to reason. But if he had to be silenced, I prefer that it had been done by the law instead of a crowd of bloodthirsty killers.
Still straddling the fence, eh? That won't help you to get reelected.
Afraid nothing can help me. I'm not running.
You're quitting the legislature?
Yep.
Why, Abe, I'm distressed. We'll miss you.
Sorry to cause you distress, Steve.
What will you do, Abe?
Judge Stewart's offered me a chance to work in his law office in Springfield. Of course, I don't know much about the law. But there's one thing I've learned here in politics. That is, ignorance is no obstacle to advancement. In fact, in some cases, it's quite an advantage. Good day, everybody.
I would have liked to see a bit more of his political career as a representative. It would have been interesting to see those formative years and how they helped shape his political strategy later. It's actually not until he meets Mary Todd, who's played here by Ruth Gordon, she would later win an Oscar for her role in Rosemary's Baby, that he has started to consider a political career for himself again, and that's mostly because Mary Todd pushed him into it. In this movie, Mary Todd's devotion to becoming the wife of a president has given her boundless ambition, in contrast to Lincoln, who would prefer to be left alone most of the time. He even breaks off their engagement at one point because he doesn't want her to push him back into the public arena. But after a touching visit to the abandoned town of New Salem, he decides to go back to Mary to ask her forgiveness, and even she admits she was a bit too pushy. Soon after, they are married, and Lincoln begins a new political career. And all of this leads up to the scenes that everybody remembers from this movie, the recreation of the famous Lincoln-Douglas debates.
Let each state mind its own business and leave its neighbors alone. If we'll stand on that principle, then Mr. Lincoln will find that this great republic can exist, forever divided into free and slave states, and we can go on, as we have done, increasing in wealth, in population, in power, until we shall become the admiration and the terror of the world.
Listen to them yell, the empty-headed idiot's yelling at empty words. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He never did.
You upset me, Brent.
Mr. Abraham Lincoln.
Don't get him, Abe.
Judge Douglas has paid tribute to my skill with the dagger. I thank him for that, but I must admit that he can do more with that weapon than I can. He can keep 10 daggers flashing in the air at the same time. Fortunately, he's so good at it that none of the knives ever falls and hurts anyone. Now, you heard the judge speak about our own labor conditions. As an American, I cannot be proud that such conditions exist. But as an American, I can ask, would any of the striking workers in the North elect to change places with the slaves in the South? Will they not rather say the remedy is in our hands? And still, as an American, I can say, thank God we live under a system by which men have the right to strike. In his final words tonight, the judge said that we can be the terror of the world. I don't think we want to be that. I think we would prefer to be the encouragement of the world. The proof that at last man is worthy to be free. But we shall provide no such encouragement unless we can establish our ability as a nation to live and grow. And we shall surely do neither if these states fail to remain united. There can be no distinction in the definition of liberty as between one section and another, one class and another, one race and another. A house divided against itself cannot stand. This government cannot endure permanently, half slave and half free.
Sure how historically accurate all of this is, but I'm told the film takes quite a few liberties with the facts. Characters are altered or invented, and the events have been rearranged around in terms of when they happened historically. But as a movie, the story progresses quite smoothly, and the dialogue by Sherwood and his co-writer Grover Jones is always excellent. They also give Lincoln a very good supporting cast, all of whom are played very well. Some of my favorites are Alan Baxter. He plays Joshua Speed, a law partner of Lincoln's whose extreme political beliefs make him very frustrated at Lincoln's own lack of ambition. Then there's Cleve Bevins. He plays a Revolutionary War veteran who befriends Lincoln and tries to warn him out of the corrupting world of politics. And then there's Gene Lockhart. You saw him playing Stephen Douglas in a couple of clips there. He's also very good. And I really like how even-handed the portrayal of Douglas is in this movie. He's very opposed to the politics of Lincoln, but he still holds the utmost respect for him. It makes it quite clear that he wishes no ill will towards him as a man. Now, overall, the direction here is serviceable but unspectacular. John Cromwell keeps the story going pretty well, and nice pacing, and there's a good sense of place and time, and he can certainly direct actors well. All the performances here are good, with a couple of exceptions, but there's really nothing that really stands out as exceptional in this movie. I mean, this movie does give a greater look at Lincoln's romances with Anne Rutledge and Mary Todd than the other ones, but overall, there's just nothing really great about this one. It's a good Lincoln biography, but nothing really exceptional. Still, it's a very good movie to watch if you're interested in the different screen portrayals of Lincoln. It does improve upon rewatches, I've discovered, and for all of the complaints about his voice, Raymond Massey perhaps looks more like Lincoln than any other actor who has played the role. Massey became so identified with the role of Abraham Lincoln, in fact, that it started to take over his life. Aside from this movie and hundreds of stage performances, Massey also played Abraham Lincoln in 2 different radio plays, as well as recordings, and 3 different television productions, 2 of which were Abe Lincoln in Illinois adaptations, and the 3rd was a production entitled The Day Lincoln Was Shot. He also showed up for a brief cameo in How the West Was Won.
And Raymond Massey as Abraham Lincoln.
Massey became so obsessed with getting his Lincoln right that he was actually known to appear in public dressed in 19th century clothing and using his Lincolnian manner of speech and accent as if it was totally normal. A friend of his, the playwright George S. Kaufman, once said that Massey won't be satisfied with his Lincoln until somebody assassinates him. It should also be said that in the years following Abe Lincoln in Illinois, Massey would play the famous abolitionist John Brown twice in the movies 7 Angry Men and Santa Fe Trail, the former of which he was played as a hero, the latter of which he was played as a villain. John Brown also made a brief appearance in Abe Lincoln in Illinois, where he was played by the director himself, John Cromwell. Abe Lincoln in Illinois received 2 Oscar nominations the year it was released, for Best Actor and Best Cinematography. It lost both of them, actor to James Stewart in Philadelphia Story, and cinematography to the Hitchcock movie Rebecca. And that brings us just about to the end of the feature film era of the Lincoln on-screen retrospective. We won't really get another major films centered around the life of Abraham Lincoln tell, this year with Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter and the Steven Spielberg movie. Next time, though, we'll be taking our first look at Lincoln as seen through the medium of television, with the major miniseries Sandberg's Lincoln. Until then, thanks for watching.